you for joining us for the program High Society Romance in Bridgerton's Regency, part of Naperville Public Library's Regency Romance Week. Welcome to the thrilling world of Bridgerton's Regency-era London. It's a world of high society and high stakes where matchmaking determines the fate of families' wealth and status. In this program, we'll familiarize ourselves with some of the important aspects of Regency society that frequently appear in novels and media set in this period, then delve into some Bridgerton read-alikes. And first we'll look at royalty. Season 1 of the series Bridgerton is set in 1813, placing it in the heart of the Regency period. So what is the Regency exactly? Well, King George III and Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz were the parents of George, Prince of Wales. When King George III was declared mentally unfit to rule the kingdom, the ruling power was put into the hands of his son in 1811. And you'll see Queen Charlotte there on the left. His son, George, Prince of Wales, who became known as the Prince Regent, there on the right. And the Prince of Wales was declared regent, not king at this point, because his father was still alive. But upon the death of his father in 1820, he ascended the throne as King George IV and reigned until his own death in 1830. George IV was succeeded by his brother William IV, who reigned for 7 years, and then he was followed by Queen Victoria. And so the Regency proper, so in other words, the period when George served as Prince Regent for his father, it only extends from 1811 to 1820, the broader span of years extending from 1795, which is when he married Caroline of Brunswick, to 1837, which marks the end of his successor William IV's reign. These are commonly considered to fall into this era. And William doesn't get his own era since his reign was only 7 years long. So he just gets lumped in with his brother. George IV was an unpopular monarch due to his spendthrift ways and lack of connection with the common people of England. But his reign remains a popular period of history. Why? Well, many reasons. This is a period of much historical drama due to the Napoleonic Wars. It's also the time period when the Industrial Revolution is starting, so there's interest in science and technology happening here. It's a period of social change. Society was moving towards abolition of slavery and labor reforms, so people with a mindset toward those things were getting more traction. And then also there's the contrast of the restraints of the social mores versus the realities of some people's behavior, and this is what makes for spicy romance novels. Court influenced the social world during the reigns of George III and Charlotte and the Prince Regent. The Regency Act of 1811 vested the power of the crown in the Prince of Wales. But in the social sphere, as we see in Bridgerton, diplomats and debutantes would still be trying to impress Queen Charlotte, his mother. The presentation of debutantes at court started in the 18th century and figures prominently in many Regency romances, including Bridgerton. Young ladies from aristocratic families were brought to court and presented to the monarch by a sponsor, usually their mother or female relative, and this signified to society that she had come of age and was officially out on the marriage market, and she would attend numerous balls and parties in order to meet eligible, appropriate marriage prospects. Queen Charlotte's Ball, which celebrated the Queen's birthday, was a debutante tradition until Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip ceased to hold it at Buckingham Palace in 1958. It petered out in 1976, though there had been a recent revival without royal patronage, with debutantes curtsying to a giant birthday cake in place of the monarch. There is not a true historical basis for the diamond of the season concept that appears in Bridgerton, where the queen favors one debutante above all the others. Some debutantes would be more popular, and the term diamond of the first water or first water was common in the 19th century to mean something of the highest quality, but the idea of choosing just one particular girl was created just for the purpose of the story. And so now we'll look at several important definitions in Bridgerton's high society. And the first thing we'll look at is the season. And we hear about the season a lot. And the season coincided with Parliament being in session between the opening of the new session in late October and the summer recess in June, when everyone would retreat to the countryside. Members of both houses of Parliament needed to be in London, and they brought their families to town with them. And it was also influenced by when the royal family was in residence in London. This would be like October to December, and then April to July. You also hear a lot about the ton, and this is short for le bon ton, meaning good form or good manners, which were critical in high society. Society was shaped by the court, as again seen in Bridgerton, and by the influencers of the day, if you will, such as the lady patronesses who created an exclusive social world at Almack's assembly rooms by allowing those of whom they approved to buy an annual voucher for 10 guineas. And this voucher was one's gateway into the ton. If one's voucher was lost or revoked for any reason, it was the equivalent of social ruin. Almack's was famously considered a marriage market for debutantes. It was the place where one would meet prospects from families with land, wealth, and titles, and preferably all three. The lady patronesses who wielded massive social power at Almack's were the wives and mistresses of men in power, nobles and ambassadors and so forth. The portraits of their personalities are not always flattering. They're variously described as overly grand, haughty and exclusive, theatrical tragedy queen, and so on. But they brought in new trends, such as the German waltz, and left behind letters full of insight into Regency-era society. They included Lady Jersey, whose mother-in-law was mistress to the Prince Regent, Lady Castlereagh, a stickler for punctuality who turned away the Duke of Wellington, the hero of the Battle of Waterloo, when he arrived late on one occasion, and Lady Sefton, who sponsored the Prince Regent's ersatz wife, Maria Fitzherbert, into society. Maria Fitzherbert was a twice-widowed lady who was a longtime companion of the Prince Regent, and they had a secret marriage, but it was not accepted by the king or the Privy Council, and so he could not accept her as his queen, and so she did not actually become his true wife, and he went on to marry Caroline of Brunswick. Balls and dances were greatly looked forward to by everyone because they allowed men and women to be introduced to one another, socialize, and, gasp, touch, albeit through gloves. Both men and women of aristocratic families would have had dancing lessons from a young age, and when a new dance trend came about, everyone was eager to learn it so they could partake at the next event. There were many social rules for balls, such as dancing no more than 2 dances with the same partner. If a lady refused to dance with anyone other than a particular gentleman, this was the equivalent of an announcement of their engagement. So what did romance look like in the Regency exactly? Well, for the upper class, marriage was about merging titles, property, and money, and love was a fortunate afterthought. Regency society bowed down to money, so even though titles, i.e. Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, etc., were important, people who had gained wealth by other means were accepted as well, though there was still some gatekeeping by the old elite. Commingling of old names and new money was seen in this era. For example, the son of a lord with an established name and title, but whose old family money was drying up, might arrange a marriage to the daughter of a new titan of industry. So new money, no title, but it could prop up his family estate. This would be considered a beneficial match for both parties, as it would elevate the young lady's social status as well. Often potential couples would be introduced at social events, but a young woman of the nobility might also just be shown a portrait of her future life mate and be told he's the one by her family, who had arranged a match with his family, and she would be expected to comply. In the Regency, a young woman was expected to follow society's rules so that she could successfully marry. An unmarried lady always had to have a chaperone in public or at events. She needed to be introduced by a mutual acquaintance. You couldn't just walk up to someone and strike up a conversation at a ball or in a shop. You can't use one another's first names, hence, Mr. Darcy, etc. No touching except while dancing, which is part of what makes balls so appealing to everyone. No meeting or speaking to members of the opposite sex alone. No riding in closed carriages together. An open-topped carriage like a barouche or a curricle is permissible, but not a closed coach because other people can't see what's going on in there. And then a gentleman can't send a lady a gift or correspondence unless they are engaged, although flowers would be considered appropriate. So all of these strictures were to protect and shelter the young lady and guide the gentleman down the path of courtship with the goal of an engagement and ultimately a marriage. For the upper class, this meant not only a union of two people, but a union of titles, property, money, and the means to beget an heir and continue the family line. If an understanding fell apart for any reason and society was already aware of it, whether the engagement was formal or not, the reputations of both parties suffered, but typically the woman's more so than the man's. And you can think of Marianne Dashwood in Sense and Sensibility or Marina Thompson in Bridgerton. Not everyone followed the expected rules of society when it came to behavior for any number of reasons. Ironically, some of the biggest sticklers for propriety in public, like the lady patronesses at Almack's, were also having affairs with each other's husbands. Despite the facade of propriety, this is a time when debauchery was embraced enthusiastically by the likes of the Prince Regent and bad boy poet of the era, Lord Byron. The Duke of Devonshire even established his mistress with rooms in his home. She lived with him and his wife for 25 years. Those with the most wealth and status could get away with the most bad behavior. Some women boldly made a personal statement of flouting social roles. One such example was Lady Caroline Lamb, author of the Gothic novel Glenarvan, who was known for her wild behavior. She famously served herself up naked in a tureen for her husband Lord Melbourne's birthday and had a tempestuous love affair with Lord Byron. Her behavior made her infamous in her day and has ensured that we remember who she is 200 years later. Not following the prescribed path of husband and children in this era also went outside of the expected rules for women. Anne Lister, known as Gentleman Jack, was a landowner in England who kept diaries of her life and is now known as the first modern lesbian. She sealed her union with her partner Anne Walker on Easter 1834, and they were together until the time of Lister's death in 1840. There's a television series about her called Gentleman Jack and a film called The Secret Diaries of Miss Anne Lister. Courtesans occupied an interesting social strata in the Regency. Often the mistresses of politicians or noblemen, they sometimes hosted literary or political salons and were financially supported by their lovers. One infamous courtesan of the day was Harriet Wilson, who was involved with various men of power, including Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, who was famed for defeating Napoleon at Waterloo. She was known for her wit, beauty, and charm. Wellington told her, "Publish and be damned," when she intended to put out her tell-all memoir, partially to get back at former lovers who had promised her annuities but had not paid up. But publish she did, in installments no less, so her eager readers had to wait for the next gossipy chapter. Lady Whistledown would approve. An elopement would have been a scandalous way to marry during this era, yet there are frequent references in Regency romances, including Bridgerton, to couples eloping to Gretna Green. Well, what does this mean? Gretna Green was the first village over the Scottish border on the main post road from London. Couples wishing to elope and bypass Hardwicke's Marriage Act of 1753, which cracked down on speedy marriages in England and Wales, but not in Scotland, would dash up to Gretna Green to be wed. All that was required for a marriage in Scotland to be legal was a declaration in front of witnesses. Those who ran away together risked social snubbing or ruined reputations once they returned home. Shocking. So, what is the reality of Regency romance? Obviously, it varied somewhat for every couple. Some couples met through friends, some engagements were arranged, some ended up content, and others not. A fortunate couple found happiness in their marriage even if they did not choose each other initially. Despite the constraints of society, the hope for a true love match obviously existed in the hearts of individuals, or contemporary love stories of this era wouldn't have been written. However, the idea, as seen in several storylines in Bridgerton, that a young lady would reject a match made by her guardians in hopes of finding true love, especially if she or the family was in need of financial or other support, and that the family or guardians would accept this decision, is fairly unrealistic for the time. Queen Charlotte and George III were an example of a true love relationship. She rose in his list of prospects after writing a letter to him, and they were married on the day they met in person. They had 15 children together, and his illness truly grieved her, particularly when they had to be separated because of it. And now on to some Bridgerton read-alikes. So if Bridgerton has whetted your appetite for spicy Regency romance, here are some other titles and authors you will enjoy. And the first is Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. While attending a ball, Charlotte Highwood and Piers Brandon hear, but don't see, a tryst occurring between two mystery guests and duck away to avoid being noticed. However, rumors start to spread that it was they who were involved in the scandalous assignation. They need to prove who the lovers truly were to clear their own names, but in the process they may fall for each other anyway. This is for fans of fun romance storylines, historical espionage, and spicy love scenes. And this book also ties together two of Tessa Dare's series, Spindle Cove and Castles Ever After. And then we have My Darling Duke by Stacey Reed, Wallflower Catherine Danvers, whose family is skirting financial ruin, comes up with the idea of announcing that she's engaged to the reclusive Duke of Thornton, who has turned his back on the Ton for years, after his former beloved shunned him due to his physical disability. Catherine thinks her scheme will help her secure matches for her sisters, and the secluded Duke won't find out until after it's all over. But as gossip grows and Catherine's story takes on a life of its own, she isn't prepared for what happens when the Duke actually turns up. This is a Beauty and the Beast style story with a Regency spin. And then we have The Beast of Beswick by Amelie Howard. And this one's described as Beauty and the Beast meets Taming of the Shrew. Lord Nathaniel Hart has retreated from society and spends his days haranguing his servants and smashing crockery. That is, until smart-mouthed Lady Astrid Everleigh makes him an offer to keep her younger sisters safe from scandal, but it will involve marrying herself to the Beast of Beswick. This is for those seeking a heartfelt, passionate romance with witty repartee and laugh-out-loud elements. And then we have To Love and to Loathe by Martha Waters. Wealthy widow Diana, Lady Templeton, is still friends with Jeremy, the Marquis of Willingham, despite turning down a proposal from him 5 years ago. But now he has a proposition for her. After receiving criticism from his latest paramour on his romantic skills, he's looking for a brief affair with his friend so she can provide an honest critique of his technique. Diana agrees, further wagering that Jeremy will be married within a year. The affair begins during a house party, the perfect opportunity for Diana to meet some legitimate love matches, but she might just fall for her old friend instead. And this is for a fan of friends to lovers stories and steamy romances. And then we have You're the Earl That I Want by Kelly Bowen. Heath Hextall would rather run his business than deal with the problems of being an earl. He thinks marrying will solve this. He'll find a good wife to keep his life in order according to the demands of society. Josephine Summerhall has always loved Heath, but that doesn't mean she wants to marry him. She does want to solve the mystery of a secret code given to Heath by a dying man. It's already caused him danger before, and she won't let it happen twice. Will Heath appreciate her efforts and her passion? And this is for fans of sizzling romance and writing laced with wit and intrigue. And then we have Aphrodite and the Duke by J.J. McAvoy. Aphrodite Dubelle was emotionally crushed when the Duke of Everley jilted her to marry another woman 4 years ago. Now, ensconced in the social whirl of her sister's debut season, Aphrodite is surprised when her lost love resurfaces. He's now recently widowed and repentant for how he rejected her. With her mother's order that she must marry this season hanging over her, will she give the Duke another chance, or will she look elsewhere? Readers seeking a diverse cast in historical romance and a dramatic storyline will be drawn to this title. And then we have Reputation by Lex Croucher. This book is described as Bridgerton meets Gossip Girl with a dash of Jane Austen. Sheltered foundling Georgiana is due to spend the summer with her aunt and uncle. Boring. Until she falls in with Frances Campbell and her wild friends, who spurn the ways of polite society. Then Georgiana meets attractive young Thomas Hawksley, but he doesn't seem impressed by the company she's keeping, and Georgiana isn't sure she really fits in with this in-crowd either, for those who appreciate social commentary along with their romance. So hopefully these titles will tide you over while you wait for Season 3 of Bridgerton to begin. And if you want more Regency Readers Advisory, be sure to attend our next program, Jane Austen and Beyond, Regency Read-Alikes. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.